Welcome to the Discovery Podcast, the show where we unbox, discover, and discuss the latest drops in personal and professional development. We are being brought to you by ZenBox. Take control. Download ZenBox on the App Store today and begin your journey of discovery and self-evaluation. I'm your host, Declan Roberts, and we are coming to you from the Toronto podcast studio this winter evening. Joining me here today, even though she's sick, still comes into work, Melissa Spatafora.
Hi, guys.
When we have the CEO, the birthday boy of ZenBox, Andre. He hates the fact that I said that, but he's got to take that one. Happy birthday, Andre.
Appreciate it.
And we have a very special guest with us today. We're going to be discussing something that's a matter that's very serious. And joining us is Lauren Power. Thank you so much for joining us, Lauren.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get right into it. Lauren, let's get to know you a little bit better. Just introduce yourself and why you believe mental health is so important.
For sure. So, hello, my name is Lauren Power. I'm 25 years old and I live in Toronto. I grew up just in the suburbs outside of the city, and I've lived in the city for about 4 years on and off. Throughout that time, I have struggled and kind of overcome a few different mental health struggles, including a few types of different forms of an eating disorder, anxiety, and depression. So why I think mental health is so important, for so many reasons. I think apps like ZenBox is doing an amazing job of really bringing light to these conversations, which I think is so important. I feel that, going through everything that I have, which obviously we'll get into in a little bit, I feel an obligation to share my story and to, help people open up and be able to share kind of what they're going through. So anybody who can relate to my story or what I'm talking about, and that's kind of why I'm here. That's kind of what's most important, is the open conversation, the open dialogue that we can begin having about these topics. So, mental health, although it's definitely seen as kind of a negative, right? We always refer to mental health as mental health issues. And we kind of talk about how people have been negatively impacted by it. I try and think of it kind of on the flip side, where mental health has actually given me opportunity to learn so much about myself and learn so much about others. Through my different struggles, I've been able to, feel certain emotions and surround myself with certain people and in certain experiences that I wouldn't have if I wasn't struggling with these things. So yeah, I try and take it as an opportunity.
Well, I think I speak for both Melissa and Andre. Thank you for having the courage to share your story. Because a lot of people, they have the stories, but don't always have the courage to say, I'm going to express myself on this public forum and share my most intimate issues that I've dealt with so I can make other people better. So thank you for that very much. I guess my first question really is, how do you know you have a mental health issue?
Right. So that's a great question. So I kind of grew up with kind of this bad character trait is what I call it, right? My parents kind of thought I was super overdramatic. I reacted really negatively and really, not violently, but very aggressive, very angrily to certain things. I had a lot of unsolicited reactions. I had severe mood swings. Again, very dramatic, very exaggerated a lot of things. And it was kind of seen as this, that's how she is. That's how Lauren is. When in reality, there was something wrong with me. Right. So it took, I think it took a lot for me and, for my family and for my friends and just society to kind of get to that point where we saw mental health as an actual issue or as an actual thing. Because when I was a kid, that wasn't really talked about. Nobody really knew what that was. So I think, with the growing conversations and with the different avenues of mental health, because we see new things kind of coming up every so often, different disorders and different things that people are able to talk about. I think that, talking to somebody, talking to a professional is obviously, your first step in figuring out if something is wrong, in that sense. I've talked to a lot of different professionals kind of going in, and it was a really overwhelming kind of scary experience. But once I was diagnosed with, what I have, I was able to kind of put steps into kind of fixing that and figuring out how to deal with these things. So
that was it sounds like
something that could be experienced as almost like an ordeal when you know something intrinsically isn't right, but you don't know how to express it or how to explain it to someone else so that you can start to figure out what the solution is, right? And you kind of gave us an overview of your journey, but if you're comfortable, do you mind going back to the beginning just so we can have, or our listeners can have a better idea of some of the things that you noticed that made you understand or take notice that this isn't normal, at least it's not for me, or I've
Almost like, how do you self-diagnose? Like,
yeah
how did you diagnose, like, you, because I believe in the opening you said you had an eating disorder. How did you know, like, oh, something isn't right?
Yeah, like I'm just talking about the very beginning, like going back to when you first started to notice like something about me, something about my state of mind is a bit different.
For sure. Okay. Yeah, for sure. So I honestly, I have feelings and like emotions and memories that go back to when I was like so young, of being very, very affected by things, and not in an emotional way, but in kind of like a negative way. Like when things kind of wouldn't go my way or things, it would be like very, very crazy reactions. And then, growing up, having like really bad anxiety when it came to like social things or it came to school or certain things, I would get bad anxiety to a point where it was physical, where I would like start sweating or like my heart was beating very fast, and I would feel like, I would physically feel very anxious. Now I can really pinpoint what those things felt like and when I experienced them. At the time, it was just like these weird sensations that I couldn't control. So when it comes to anxiety, physical reactions is a huge thing. I've done like a lot of personal research on that myself, and kind of when people come to talk to me about anxiety, I always ask them about how they're feeling physically, because a lot of times you actually can feel it in that way. Like your body is so smart and so in tune, and it can really express, like things that you can't understand or explain in your head. Your body's actually able to show you these things. But yeah, so anyway, going back into kind of my journey. So, when I was young, elementary school, high school, whatever, I now looking back, I know that it was like a milder form of anxiety and depression, like really, really sad episodes, and things that just weren't explained, right? Like nothing necessarily going on, nothing that, bad happening or anything, just like really, really low moods for, no real reason, especially at that age. It was very strange. And then graduating high school, I went into university, and I was always I was never like a smaller girl. I was always like bigger than my friends and kind of like chubby. I was never like obese or anything like that, but I really did see myself as, as being like very, very overweight, even though I wasn't. It was a body dysmorphia issue that I had. And in university, I developed a really bad eating disorder, and it was it was anorexia initially, where it was like not eating at all. And then it developed into bulimia, where it was like throwing up what I was eating. And there was a few other, unspecified or different eating disorders that came into that. But it was interesting what you were saying before, like, how do you know when you have something like that? At the time, even though those things are like easily Googleable, right? Like, what is this? Like, you can name exactly what was going on, but I didn't think that I had it. Right? Like, even though I was doing everything that it said, I was like, that's not me. I don't have that. So I had dropped about 30 to 40 pounds in like a month or two. And because growing up, everybody around me was thin. My mom, my sister were thin. All my friends were thin. Losing weight was a goal. Right?
Yeah. So there was no alarm bells being set off by you losing weight.
Totally.
Yeah.
And
can I ask you a question? What's your nationality?
My mom's Maltese, my dad's Irish.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I know there's certain cultures where eating is just a part of the lifestyle.
Right. And it is for me. Like my family actually owns a alcohol importing company, so we import wine and tequila. So we're always surrounded by winemakers and all of that. And
bring anything for this?
I did.
Don't come up in here empty-handed now.
I did for the birthday boy.
Hey.
Oh my goodness, you guys! Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you tell me what this is?
So I brought a Saint-Thomé rosé. So Saint-Thomé is the winery, Tenuta Saint-Thomé. This is a rosé. So it's a sparkling rosé, which is it's kind of like an in between a white and a red wine.
Love rosé.
This is Pinot Grigio grapes, and then it's macerated with Pinot Noir grape skin, so it gives it that red color. This is one of my favorite sparklings. It's delicious. The color is really beautiful on it. And yeah, happy birthday.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a commercial break and get some drinks in. And
that was, you know what? That was a real pro. You see how she switched it out?
Yeah, real smooth.
like ready, born ready. I love it. Yeah, sorry to
No,
interrupt.
it's all good.
Exactly.
I do want to just kind of take a step back.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned that you realized that you were going through eating disorders and whatnot, did you go seek help? And what was kind of like your first couple steps on getting the help that you needed?
Totally. So at that time, I was so focused on like the weight loss and the kind of the appreciation and celebration I had got from people. Because even if I hadn't told somebody that my goal was losing weight, just by looking at me, they would assume that that's what it was. So even people that weren't, close with me everybody was like, you look great, you look amazing. And, those comments that you get when you lose weight or you look a certain way. And at that point, it was like I just wanted to keep going and nothing could stop me. And, something that is I want to talk about a little bit more later is like, what do you do when you realize that you're going through something and you realize you need help? And it's talking to somebody that that you can really trust and that won't judge you and that will help you validate your feelings. Because a lot of people will just push it to the side, especially if mental health isn't. It takes work. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of different things. It takes work. It takes support. Sometimes it takes finances when you have to go seek help from counseling and things like that. So it's a really, really hard space to put yourself in and to start accepting that you need to, start doing something about it. So, I reached out to somebody who I, kind of had their own struggles, and they weren't really able to kind of understand how to help me and what I needed. And, once I kind of was strong enough to have that conversation and it kind of led in a way that was a little bit passive, it kind of, I shied away from doing that for a little while.
I have a question. Because I think it's important for our listeners who are suffering.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, when you spoke to your family about this, what was their reaction? And the reason why I ask is because sometimes families unintentionally, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'll speak with my own parents. Sometimes they're just not educated and they came from a completely different time, not understanding that mental health today is completely different than the way it was for you guys in the 70s. Believing it was still there, but it was handled differently. So I'd like to know a little bit about that experience. 'Cause I think there's listeners of ours who are going through things. Maybe they're younger. Maybe they want to go talk to their mom and dad, but don't know how. So if you could just enlighten us with that.
For sure. So a few different strategies that I used when communicating with my parents. The first one was having somebody. So at the time I had a really good friend and I had a cousin who was a little bit older than me, who was able to communicate with me and communicate with my parents. So I kind of used them
Were they
as
suffering as well?
No. So I kind of used them as like a third party for them to be able to communicate, because it's also hard some things you can communicate and you can tell people, but talking to your parents, like, it's just that relationship, right? It's really hard. There's a lot of things that are already built in that relationship. There's possible judgment, there's history, there's so many things. So that relationship, navigating around that with mental health is hands down is the most difficult thing I dealt with. I now work with my parents, and we've gone from living in the same house, not speaking to each other, me yelling and, them not understanding me, to now the three of us going to the same job every day and working together. So it's like, it's taken us quite a bit of time. The second thing was realizing exactly what you said, that they don't understand, and sometimes they can't. Right. And sometimes, and they can't a lot of times in the moment, right? Like mental health isn't something that we can just read about and completely understand it. Going through mental health and reading about it is so completely different. So having the conversation that I sometimes still have with my parents is them being like, I don't get it. And I'm like, you don't have to get it, but you have to respect it. Mm-hmm. Right? You don't need to know exactly how I'm feeling or what I'm going through. I can communicate up to this point, but once I can't anymore, then you're just going to have to close the book on it, because there's
it's not really their journey.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I feel like one thing that is sometimes tough to accept is that it's almost our responsibility as the child to be that bridge for our parents, right? There's a lot of things, not just mental health related, but a lot of things that we are going through that our parents don't necessarily understand or will never understand, but we do our best to bridge the gap of information, to bridge the gap of experience, to bridge the gap of like potential ignorance to certain things. And it's no one's fault. It's not theirs. It's not our fault. But sometimes we have to accept that we have to take that responsibility. We can't project our knowledge or lack of ignorance of certain things onto somebody who doesn't have the same, like hasn't gone through the same things. It's a completely different generation, right? As an example, look at social media, right? When Facebook first came out, it was our group that was on it heavy. Fast forward now, 15 years, our parents are finally catching up, and they're the ones like like Facebook is popping.
Yeah, they're using it the most now.
Yeah, they're using it the most, and they're using it the way it was meant to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like our parents aren't posting selfies and this, that, and the third. Like they're making social commentary. They're engaging with family members. Like they're using it how it's supposed to be used, because they weren't like, they haven't been what's the word I'm looking for? Like they haven't been influenced negatively by it, right? They were mature when they were given this tool. Right? So they're able to use it the way it was meant to be used. We got it. We were kids. We were given keys to a Ferrari. And what are we going to do? Joyride. We're going to do crazy ass shit, right? Because there was no rules to it. No one taught us how to use it. But, I went off on a bit of a tangent. My main point was we sometimes have to be that bridge for our parents. So don't take it so hard on your parents when they don't understand certain things. Don't take it so hard on your family members, on your significant others, your friends, your colleagues, because not everybody's going to be at your level of woke. You know what I'm saying?
But I think Lauren brought up a great point. It's not always your responsibility to understand.
Exactly.
And I think that's a fantastic point that we mess on. It's like, I don't need you to understand. I just need you to support me. Mm-hmm. That's it. It's actually easier for you to show me love, and I can get through it.
But even that though can be too much of an expectation. You know what I mean? I know it sounds like a crazy thing to say, but sometimes we just have to let people get there the same way they gotta let us get there. You know what I mean?
Get there on their own.
Yeah, it's a two-way street. Like we can't expect somebody to be there day one. Like I read something today, and I think one famous person was discussing Dwayne Wade's family situation with Dwayne Wade's 12-year-old now daughter, right? Yep. Who's come out as, I don't want to say the wrong, I think is transgendered, right?
He was born a he.
Right.
Now Dwayne Wade said in the interview, he wants to be referred to as a she.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the backstory. The reason I bring it up is, so another famous person decided to make a comment on that, right? And then there was a bunch of, people chiming in. And for anybody who didn't necessarily understand or agree, immediately they were attacked and called homophobic the reason I bring this up is not everybody that doesn't understand, or I'll use the word understand, is not necessarily homophobic. They just don't understand yet. They may not. But the thing is, when we attack people right away or hold them to a certain standard that they're not ready for yet, we immediately create barriers and start to alienate the possibility of even getting there.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we have to be careful of in projecting, like, or having these expectations that people are going to understand the whatever mental health issues that we may have, whatever other else things that we're going through in life. Expecting people to understand right away, I feel like it's not the path to understanding. It's not the path to healing. It's not the path to teaching other people.
Right.
Go ahead.
So just to take it back a little bit, you've experienced different types of mental health issues, and you've spoke about a little bit how you seek the help that you needed, how you spoke to your parents about it. But what would you say the biggest obstacle you had to overcome was with your mental health, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, so I will touch on kind of what we didn't get to. So judgment for sure was the biggest thing. I was kind of going through everything about 3 years ago. So once, basically, to kind of finish off my story there, I suffered with a few different types of eating disorders. I was working, I moved downtown. I was working in this like really high-paced job that was really long hours, and I was trying to keep up with the social aspect and the not eating aspect and the having a job aspect and the very, very low moods and the crazy anxiety that wouldn't let me sleep, and all of these things. I basically just I hit complete rock bottom, and I tried to commit suicide. And 2 days later, I was put in a treatment center. So I was there for 2 months. I lived there. I was in Guelph. And I was there for 2 months, and it was it was the craziest thing ever. It was like one day I was like this girl who, and growing up, I did have this kind of perception of me, this girl who, grew up in a beautiful home with her lovely family, who was always having parties, and, who was pretty, and who had these great friends and all of this. Like, what's wrong with her? Like, there can't be anything wrong with you. Right?
It's so funny you're saying that, because when you said you were in a home and when you walked in here, I'm like, are we talking about the same person?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So, and then to being to really being like in a treatment center in in the forest, like bawling, like crying so hard I couldn't breathe, like didn't care what I was wearing, didn't care what I looked like, didn't care who was there. From having all of these crazy concerns and things that got me so worked up, and the things that I cared about so much that got me to this space, to just literally relinquishing all control of everything was definitely the hard, getting there was the hardest thing. And then the judgment, right? It was 2 months of my life. People were like, what happened to you? You were out partying a month ago, and now no one's seen you, no one's heard from you. What's going on? So that was hard. That was I was really scared to talk about what had happened. And about 2-3 months after I got out of treatment, I made a post on my Instagram and kind of was like, hey, I told a few close friends, and I kind of made a post, and I was like, hey, and I was like, this is what happened to me, and it happens to a lot of people, and it's okay, and it's normal, and it's nothing to be, ashamed of. It's and I felt that because of the way that I grew up and all of the comments I received, how could you be going through that? You're so pretty. You're so funny. You have this.
This is after the post?
No, sorry, beforehand.
Okay.
You drive this car. You have these shoes, right? How could you be dealing with that? And it was it does, mental health, it
doesn't discriminate.
It definitely does not.
And it's like any health, right? People get diabetes, people get cancer, people get I listen to a lot of sports radio, and there's a sports talk host on TSN. His name is Michael Landsberg, and he's coined this phrase sick, not weak. right? People have this idea that people with mental health are weak because you just thug it out. You know what I mean? You're supposed to thug it out. And that's what our parents did. Mm-hmm. You either were thugged it out or you were so far gone that you got put into institution or like, you know, used all kinds of insane medical treatments to try to get it out of you, or go to church and, you know, get the Holy Ghost to push it out of you or something. You know what I mean? Like, we're laughing at these things, but this is what happens, right? And it still happens in a lot of countries, and even in Canada, it still happens. It just depends, like, on how you're brought up, the family you're in, the opportunities you have. Some people are still going through that, so it's pretty serious. But the reason I bring up the sick, not weak is, like, people are saying that to you, not realizing that, like, what you were going through was an illness. It wasn't a choice. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You didn't just wake up one day and say, all right, fuck it. Like, I don't mind me cussing a little bit. You didn't just wake up one day and say that, right? Like, it's just, this is something that, like you said, you were dealing with on and off throughout your life until it became like went from like something that was chronically happening to an acute situation that you needed to handle, and you did, right? So this is an amazing conversation to have, but the main point that I'm taking away from this is that we really need to educate ourselves, and having someone like yourself share your story is huge, because not just for people that are going through it, but people that don't know the signs, people that don't understand it, that might say inflammatory things that might make it worse instead of better, right? So
right.
Totally. So I don't know if you guys know, I think Andre does, me and Lauren known each other for years.
Was she one of the people? we'll mess her up right now.
But I remember that exact post when you shared your story on social media, and I was shocked because I had no idea. And then seeing that post, I was just so happy that you were able to come to some sort of okay with an okay feeling to share your story with everybody. And I remember reading the comments and everyone being super supportive and all that great stuff. But I wanted to know how you felt after you put that out to the world and shared your message. Although you got it out there and it must have felt great, were you a little bit nervous to see people's reactions after you shared your story?
Yeah, I was definitely nervous. I had written the post it took me about a month, and it wasn't something that I was like, I'm going to make a post on Instagram. I was just writing about what had happened. Like, at the time, journaling and writing was like a very good outlet for me. So by kind of November-ish, I had left treatment in August. So by kind of November-ish, it had kind of formulated itself into this, like, this is where I have been, and I was like, oh, this like looks like an Instagram post, right? It was very like, it wasn't intentional. And what happened was I got a phone call from a good friend of mine, and he called me and he was like, how's the baby? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, there's a joke that like you got pregnant and like you had this baby, right? At like 21 years old. And, you know, he was joking around, and I started laughing. I was like, yeah, like I'm like, and then I hadn't really thought about what people were thinking. And it wasn't, at the time, it wasn't something that like made me, you know, feel a negative way, but it was like, wow, like that's so, it was kind of funny. I was like, I wonder what people are thinking. I wonder where people think I was. And at that time, I remember it was like, I remember the exact day. I remember exactly where I was. And I was like, it gave me like this, like, okay, like this validation. I was like, okay, it's the time. Like, it just gave me this sense of like, we're posting this today. This is what's happening. And I did it. I was so scared. I like did it. I threw my phone. I ran downstairs. I left my phone in my room, and I was like, okay, like whatever happens
is going to happen.
Yeah, I was like, whatever happens. Like at the time, like people weren't sharing on social media as much about mental health and stuff. It was kind of weird. And I had never shared it. I think the eating disorder was definitely the hardest thing, because it was something that affected me probably the hardest, with like the whole physical looking aspect of it. But the response was amazing. I still talk about social media, or I still talk about mental health on my social media. And I have nothing but nothing but good stories to share, really, about the people that have reached out and the people that have asked for help. That was a big goal of it too.
I got 2 questions.
Yeah.
Question number 1. With your body dysmorphia problems that you were suffering with, how much of that was caused because of social media?
So definitely a lot. I think that because it really did start when I was quite young, and we didn't have social media then, it came from just a place of comparison with like friends and family and things like that. And then once social media hit and kind of access to the world and access to a lot of things in the world that aren't real, that's when it like really hit hard. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it was, I think now with social media, like, because I kind of like curate my social media page to, you know, body positivity, to people that aren't posting like, look how skinny I am, like look at my fit tee, like I don't follow those types of people. So the way I see social media now is like so much different. I know it's still out there and there's still a lot of that on there, but I think that there's so many amazing people out there really advocating for like the anti-eating disorder, the body positivity, all of that I think it's a much better space than when it started.
That's great advice. This is the first time I've heard someone say that. Like they censor themselves from that type, because most times people just say, oh, it's all over the place, like I can't do anything about it, I see it everywhere. But what you just said, that's like it's so simple and yet so effective. Like you can choose what you watch on TV, you can choose what you listen to on the radio, and you can choose what is on your feed on your social media. That's amazing. I'm definitely gonna do that myself, just like, because there's a lot of stuff that's just nonsense, like absolute nonsense, like gossip and just stuff that's not positive, stuff that's not constructive, and it's just a waste of time, right? So
Yep.
So my great point, Andre. And another question I want to bring up is, if you feel yourself going back down that road, what are your warning signs, and how do you make sure you don't, let's say, slip and then slide?
Yeah. So having the inner dialogue with myself and being like so completely honest is very important. I always felt like there was so many different parts of me, like when I was struggling with everything, that would kind of tell me different things. And now that I'm able to kind of streamline that conversation in my own head, it's just checking in on myself constantly, being honest with myself, and then constantly reevaluating the different tools in my toolbox as I grow and advance as a person and as somebody on a mental health journey. So will my methods. What's working for me right now may not be working for me in a month. There's strategies that I still use from when I kind of got out of treatment that still work, and there's certain things that I need to do when I feel like that. So it really depends on kind of what specifically I'm struggling with when it comes to kind of the eating disorder. I kind of go back to that like methodical, that structured approach to eating. I go back into that. Like sleeping is a huge thing for me. I have always struggled with my sleep. So making sure that's on track and consistent, that's a really big thing. And then, I have different people in my life. Like my therapist, now I see somebody for talk therapy. That's very, very effective for me and very important.
what is that?
Just like talk therapy, seeing somebody and just like communicating verbally.
Okay.
But at the beginning of my journey, I was seeing a therapist, like just traditional therapy. And it was so ineffective for me because I couldn't communicate. I couldn't explain anything in my own head. I couldn't, right? I had to I felt like actually like writing stuff and making graphs and making charts, like that's the only way I could actually put things down. So initially I started CBT therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's a way to really like understand your thought process. So it's your thoughts, feelings, and your behaviors, and it's in like this very like elementary style chart. And it was a way for me to understand, again, my thoughts, my behaviors, and my feelings. And when I'm really, really struggling, I go back to that like very basic kind of approach where I just look at when a thought comes into my head, what my behaviors are and what my feelings are, and I figure out where kind of the roadblock or the negative action is taking place, and how I, go about fixing that.
What are your top 3 priorities on a weekly basis to ensure happiness and strong mental health while maintaining a career and a social life?
Yeah. So there's definitely different things that I do, eating healthy or trying to eat healthy, going to the gym a few times a week and those types of things. But there are 3 things that I, check in on, daily. And those 3 things is communication. And I always go back to communication. At the beginning of my journey, it was really like communication with myself, but really with others, being able to communicate what I need and what I want, asking for those things, when I need to, being able to actually authentically be myself, in a social setting or in a work environment, and being able to be a figure of authority, or being able to, be the person that I need to be in these certain places, and being able to communicate effectively. That's very important. I find when I'm not able to communicate is really when everything starts to, buckle down in on me, and like
the walls are closing.
Exactly. The second thing is passion. Making sure that in that week, every day I try to for a little bit, but making sure I'm doing something that I'm passionate about. Making sure that there's something that really excites me, that brings me joy, that like lights me on fire a little bit. That is super important. I find like when I, put myself into work or into social things, even that I don't want to do, right? Like there's that saying where it's like, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And making sure that I'm filling my calendar with like the hell yes stuff, and I'm not doing things because I feel obligated or I feel like I need to be there or whatever. Obviously with career, it's not as easy to, do all the awesome things, because you have to do the kind of shitty things when it comes to work sometimes. But definitely in terms of your free time and your social life, like doing things that really that you're passionate about, I definitely try. Well, I do implement weekly. And then the last thing is having clarity. So I always have this overarching message or this value system in my head that I live by. And it's always just to be clear and not to be confused about something. And if I'm confused about something that's going on in my life, or I'm confused about a feeling, it's that I have to work through it. I always want to like be going in a direction, and not to put too much pressure on myself, and always moving forward, or always moving, always learning, always exploring, always doing something. I just don't. Feeling stuck and feeling clear and confused is like the scariest place for me. So that's definitely something that I work on.
Awesome. So to conclude our conversation today, for those who are listening that would like help with their mental health, what would be your biggest piece of advice?
So, okay, a couple things. Find somebody who you love and who you trust, again, who won't judge you and who will validate your feelings. Try and find somebody in your immediate circle who can do that. If not, try and find somebody sometimes it's easier to talk to someone that you're not super close with, but try and find it in yourself to find that courage, because once you're able to make that step, that really is the hardest thing. The other thing that I will say is to really write down how you're feeling. And if writing isn't something, for me initially, it was really hard for me to express how I was feeling during writing. So I would talk to myself and I would record it. And then that way I was able, and when we write stuff, we can go and read back, but I was able to go back and listen to those things. And when you just allow yourself to just fully express without anybody listening or anybody reading, and no judgment, like you'll be shocked by the things that come up in your own head, and the conclusions you can make, and the different things that actually come out. I think that is super, super effective. And then obviously, if you're really struggling to seek a professional, calling a therapist or calling an emergency line if needed is definitely the number one tip. Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that, Lauren. Can we give her a round of applause for opening up? That was amazing. Thank you so much. And I really hope that our listeners have the courage to open up now and to take your advice. I think you gave some great tips. So thank you so much for joining us this evening and discussing the importance of mental health. That wraps up our episode today. We are being brought to you by ZenBox. Take control. Download ZenBox at the App Store today and begin your journey of discovery and self-evaluation. Thank you very much, everyone.